Yes, I'm still doing this, and in today's video I'm going to sample my real drum kit into 1 megabyte of data, and I'm going to cram it into this, because foot drums. Sorry it's been a while since the last video. As you might remember, I've been building my first guitar, which is going to be a whole video series all of its own, but in the meantime the foot drums must continue. So as part of that process, I'm looking to try and find my own sound and cram it into here. The Yamaha DTX 502 allows you to load up about 20 of your own wave samples. However, it only gives you a tiny 1 megabyte to fit that into. To give you an idea of how tiny 1 megabyte is in audio terms, a CD quality stereo wave file would normally use about 10 megabytes of audio per minute. So a 3-minute pop song would be about 30 megabytes. 1 megabyte only gives you about 5 to 6 seconds of audio time. However, if you use mono wave files, you can double that to about 10 to 11 seconds. And I'm hoping for what I need, that's going to be just enough. But why go to all the trouble of creating my own drum samples in the first place? I mean, the DTX 502 has plenty of great drum samples in here already. But the thing is, if you've heard a lot of MIDI drum sounds, you know that they sound a little processed, a little too perfect, and never quite the way a real drum kit sounds when you sit down and play one. Also, like any musician, I want to find my own sound, and I kind of already have. Remember back when I was working on a mechanical foot drum kit, I put together all the pieces of the kit that I really liked, and it sounds unique, and I'm really quite attached to the way that kit sounds. So if I can get that kit and capture the essence of it and put it in here, I'll be really pleased. Then there's the issue of live drum sound. When I'm playing live, I want it to sound live, or at least fairly natural. I want it to sound a little bit like someone just threw a bunch of SM57s on my drum kit and fed it through the PA system without much in the way of mixing. I don't really want any room sound in my samples because the idea is that the room sound will come from whatever room I'm actually performing in, or at least that's the idea. So to sample my drums, I set up 2 mics on everything. An SM57 up close, and a condenser about 60 centimeters away just to give me extra mixing options. I ran these into a Zoom recorder, and then I imported them straight into Pro Tools. From there, I listened through and I chose the best example from each piece of the drum kit. Then I copied and pasted those examples into a crude drum beat in Pro Tools using the grid editor. Next, I recorded a simple guitar part and even a simple bass part using an octave pedal, just so that I could hear what those drum samples would sound like in context. Having everything put together like this allowed me to mix my drum samples the same way I'd mix a regular song. Once I was happy with the drum samples, I edited the start and the end of each sample to be as tight as possible. Kick, snare, tom and hi-hat were no problem at all. They're all very short sounds, and in total they only came to about 200 kb, or 2 seconds of audio time. It's the ride and the crash that are the problem. Crashes and rides have a long sustain time. In fact, if you're really going to capture a ride or a crash properly, you could use up 10 to 15, maybe even 20 seconds, like easily. But I can't do that. I can only fit my ride and my crash into the remaining 800 kilobytes of data that I've got, or roughly 8 seconds. So I gave 3.5 seconds to the ride and 4.5 seconds to the crash. The reason why I think that'll probably be okay, fingers crossed, is because although a cymbal has a very long decay time, it's only the first 3 or 4 seconds that I think are musically relevant. I've probably just offended a whole bunch of drummers out there, but it's kind of true. When you hit a crash and it starts to die off, there's a point where it decays and it just kind of disappears into the mix. It gets lost among the other instruments in the sound. So the first 3 or 4 seconds are important, but after that, even if you have a long sample, it'll tend to fade away and you won't really hear it after 3 or 4 seconds anyway, or at least your attention will be diverted away from that cymbal by that time. so I'm hoping 3 or 4 seconds will be enough. And besides, that's all I've got to work with. Once everything was edited, I bounced my WAV files out of Pro Tools, making sure everything was in mono. To get them into the DTX 502, the samples had to be uploaded to Dropbox and then loaded into the device through the Yamaha app. During this process, you can also assign each sample to a specific trigger input along with some other settings. Unfortunately, it was at this point that I discovered a rather disappointing feature of the Yamaha DTX 502. And that is that when you load in your own hi-hat sample, you lose the ability to have open and closed hi-hat articulations. That means you can only have one hi-hat sound, and that's it. I think this is probably because hi-hats and the infinite variety of sounds they can create are just too complex to be represented by one wave sample. I suspect that manufacturers like Yamaha probably use several samples manipulated by a software algorithm to represent a hi-hat. That's getting into the realm of proprietary software, coding, and it's a little bit complicated, and I'm just happy to let it go. What I'll probably do is just try and find a sound within the Yamaha DTX 502 that's as close to my hi-hat as possible, and I'll live with it. So with all that done, what does it sound like? Well, here's my first try mucking around with these new drum samples with some simple guitar playing over the top, and it's not terrible. Listening back to that, what I like about it is that actually sounds like my drumming. Like, I'm not a brilliant drummer or anything, so if I was playing along with that on my drum kit, that's basically what it would sound like, which is really cool. The other thing worth pointing out here is that you can finally see one of the benefits of my foot drums layout in action, and that is that the rhythmic movements of my right toe are linked to the rhythmic movements of my right hand strumming. It's a little hard to explain, and I guess I may be the only person in the world who's ever played foot drums in exactly this way, with exactly this layout, but it just seems very intuitive and very natural to have the right foot copying the movements of the right hand. To have them linked together in that way just makes sense, and it feels very easy to play. Anyway, the saga continues, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.